Yeah, my name is Steve Dawes. I'm the Assistant Director for UAW Region 1D.
And you, local or your region covers the Flint area, and we're talking about how did this thing happen and why did it happen, this water crisis there. And you were saying that people knew that this was going to be a problem, and yet they continued to use the water from the Flint River?
Almost immediately, when they switched over to the water, people in Flint started complaining about the color and the smell and many other complaints. One of our General Motors plant noticed right away that the engine blocks were coming out of the machining center where they have water coolant for cutting. They were rusting almost immediately. So they switched over to the Flint Township water. And there was a lot of mistakes made by the people who had control of this switchover, which was basically the governor and his appointed Darnell, or at the time it would have been Mike Brown, and then Kurtz, and then Darnell Early. When they made this switch, like I said, they made several mistakes. First of all, they didn't do enough research on the water itself. There's a big difference when you draw water out of the Great Lakes and how much you have to treat it and the cleanliness of that water to start with versus when you take it out of a river. And the Flint River is not a very big river. I mean, there's some spots in it that are only a few feet deep. So you get a lot more. The runoff is contained more in the water. Any kind of
Are there chemicals from the factories that are going into the toxins that are going into the Flint River?
We have a lot of Canadian geese, so the E. coli is always an issue in shallower rivers. You have the runoff from farm fields and road salt and all that type of stuff that doesn't get dissipated out over. It's kind of like taking some or anything and you put in, that would dirty up water and putting it in a 55-gallon drum. It's not going to dirty it up versus you put it in a cup. So that was one of the big problems with the Flint River.
Well, you said that the question of the chemicals, that they could have added chemicals and they didn't to save money. Is that
they were supposed to, and we're being told it's federally mandated that they were supposed to put the anti-corrosive chemical into the water, but because it was a cost of around $100 a day, they chose not to do it. So if you take that, you just do the math on that. That's under $100,000 for 2 years. In April of 16, it's going to be 2 years, and this thing is going to be costing billions and billions of dollars. It's not only going to cost the residents of the city of Flint. It's going to cost the residents of the state of Michigan. It's going to cost the residents of this entire nation. And it all could have been avoided.
And you're saying that it was illegal to shut off the water, which Detroit threatened Flint with, but that it wasn't challenged by the officials in Flint, that they didn't challenge the shut off of the water?
Correct, because some of them supported going to the Flint River water. Even one that was not a local politician, but now has since been elected, he made the statement that not only should we be going to the Flint River water so we don't have to pay Detroit these high rates, but there's enough we can bottle it and sell it.
And the Snyder government have argued that it's better if you have privately run operations. What does this have to do with privatization, what's happened in Flint?
Well, yeah, nobody's ever been able to show me or talk me into that anything's being privatized ever has worked out. There ain't one thing I've known that's been privatized that was a benefit to the service and the people that would have kept the service.
So who was pushing to privatize? I know in the schools in Detroit, they're trying to make it a charter district. It seems like that's the scheme or the plan to make everything private and in the process also attack public workers. Is that what's going on in Detroit and Michigan?
The trend is to push. The governor has talked about in the Republican legislature has talked about wanting to privatize the prisons, want to privatize the schools, and the problem with that, especially when you take our schools, a lot of these privatized companies, they don't do background checks. They don't do, and in the system today, if I have an issue with one of them, if I'm a school principal or a school administrator, if I've got an issue with one of my employees, I can address it. When you're privatized, you don't have the opportunity to do that. You have to go to a third party and let them know your issues, and then they address it. And in the meantime, the issues keep happening and the problems keep happening. And in most cases, there isn't a savings in the private when you privatize. So one or two things happen: either the savings that the new company puts in there comes from off the backs of the workers, and they put it in their pockets, or you're losing service.
And your members live. I guess some of your members live in Flint. Have any of your members or their families been made ill by this water situation?
Not that I know of, because some of the conditions that happen with it. Some people develop rashes. Some people, have them type issues, really dry skin, rashes. But the long-term effects of the lead is what is the unknown, the scary part. And let me give you an example. The EPA tests water levels at parts per billion. So at 0, naturally, is the ideal world. At 5 parts per billion, it should be thrown a caution. At most of these houses that they're testing with high levels of lead are testing at over 150 parts per billion. In one house, tested at over 13,000 parts per billion. At 5,000 parts per billion, it is considered toxic. And in a nutshell, what happens is that this water is the chemicals and the high amounts of chlorine is so corrosive that a lot of the older homes in Flint have lead supply lines, which are from, the supply line from the road up to the house. Over the years, that lead has a coating on it. So as the Detroit water ran through there, it wasn't exposed to the lead because the internal of the pipe were coated. Well, this water is so corrosive that over time now it is eaten that protective coating off, and so as that coating is gone now, it's also eroding right at that lead pipe, and that's where the high levels of lead are coming from. Now, so the long-term fix is going to have to be that the pipes are going to have to be replaced.
Now, the governor, Snyder, has apparently appropriated $26 million, but that's for water. Why hasn't the state said they're going to replace these pipes in Flint so that you can have pipes that have fresh water and you don't have to worry about the water?
Well, because this quite frankly, this hasn't been on their radar screen. I mean, they not only till that doctor out of Hurley, Dr. Hannah, what is her name? Only did she find out that she's testing these kids with lead, and their lead levels are double and sometimes triple what they normally would be. And only then, when people were going, hey, this is pretty serious, only then did they even open their mouth and start getting involved in it. I mean, that's why we went over to Lansing to protest. It wasn't a UAW protest. It was a community protest. That was, we were just invited and we showed up. And if you remember what I said over there, when the people in Michigan voted down the emergency manager bill, and in the lame duck section, the Republicans ran through in the dark of night like cowards. They ran through not only a worse bill than the people voted for, then they put appropriations out, so it was made a referendum proof. They have the blood of our children, blood of our seniors, and blood of our Flint residents on their hands. And we're going to make damn sure that they don't wash it off and pretend it never happened.
Do you think the governor should be criminally prosecuted for what happened in Flint?
This thing, in my opinion, has two different paths. One is the path of the accountability and who should be the responsible and accountability part of that. That is well on its way, and that's what the will come out at the end of that. Who's going to be held responsible, and who should be held, what that means. The other path is the humanitarian path, and that's what really our members are really counting on now. They are really concentrating on now, is really taking care of the people in the city of Flint. I mean, our institution has always believed in giving back to the community in which you work and live, and there's no better time than right now to help our community out. But who should be held accountable? I think we ought to go back and look at this emergency manager bill and see who the ones that voted on it, and they ought to be the ones. They all ought to be held accountable.
Well, the governor was kind of blaming the local officials and blaming the city officials. He really seemed to be ducking his own responsibility and how the city was being managed. The other question I have is when the plant shut down, the GM plant turned off its water because it was corroding or rusting the engines. What did the members think in the plant? Because obviously, if the water is rusting the engines of the plant, there's a concern that it might affect the people who are drinking the water in Flint.
Right, and plants now have the work sites have all switched over either to reverse osmosis systems. The drinking fountains having filters, and they're changed on a regular basis, and they test the water in the work sites quite often. We have a health and safety departments in every plant, and they're really keeping up on it, doing their job, giving everybody peace of mind.
Well, when that happened at the GM plant, was there concern among your members that this water was going to, if it was threatening the machinery in the plant, that would also threaten people in the community? Because this happened way before they actually became public or an issue. That this was a danger to the community.
Right. Oh yeah, and I will give General Motors and their counterparts, their chairman and presidents, credit. They jumped right on it right away, and they got that issue under control in a very, very quick time.
But it didn't affect what was going on in the community as far as the water continuing to go into residents' homes or people who lived in the community.
Right. I mean, and if you go back and you look at, people in the city of Flint, people was raising all kinds of cane about this water, and they were showing gallons of it, and the yellowish color and the smell. And they, a lot of the officials just passed it off. Our government didn't get involved in it out of Lansing until here just recently in the last several months. And I'd still say today, if it wasn't for that Dr. Hannah Mona Letitia, that without her finding and letting the kids, they still would not be doing anything about it.
Did the union at that time make it a public issue, saying that the bad water was, if it was forcing the plant to close, there should be a change in what was happening to the water going to the residents?
They didn't close the plant. They just switched over to a different water system.
Yes. I understand. They changed the water. Yeah. Yeah,
that's kind of when they started testing the water, saying, well, what is wrong with this thing, with the stuff, and I wasn't involved in that, so I don't know whether they didn't. I know they were testing it because it had high levels of chlorine. And going back and when Flint did that, because of the high levels of chlorine, they would send out these boil your water notices. But that was and I forget the chemical that is what, when you have high levels of chlorine, what this chemical, what the name of it was. That's why they'd have people boil their water. And as this thing kind of progressed, that's when more and more the city residents, they were starting to band together with these committees and starting to show protest. And it just really gained traction. And all along they were right. There was something wrong with their water.
And the cost of refurbishing or bringing in new piping is going to be hundreds of millions, maybe billions. Is there a campaign now in Flint and in Michigan demanding that the government, state government and federal government replace the piping? So it sounds like if it's not done, Flint really, the question of the survival of Flint is raised if they don't have proper piping.
Mayor Karen Weaver is the top priority on her list. And she's been meeting with the governor. She's been meeting with state officials, and she's been meeting with some of our higher government officials trying to figure out what is the next plan to get that accomplished.
So the lesson of this for the people who say that get the government out of running public facilities, you would say that the lesson has been a real disaster in Flint and Michigan, that privatization
and the emergency financial manager, because they come in here, like I said, they created the problem, then they come in here and blame the victim, and then now look at the mess that it's in, and it was all over trying to save money.
Okay, well, I want to thank you very much, Steve, for joining us on KPFA Workweek, and I appreciate your comments, and I feel for the people of Flint and Michigan who are, particularly in that city, living a nightmare, so thanks for joining us on this show.
Yep, well, I can tell you, and there's a lot of effort in this city to get water out to these people and get filters. Just this weekend, Sheriff Bob Bickel had 400 licensed plumbers that went out and canvassed and either installed new faucets and filters or just filters and made sure people understood how they did it. And these guys did it all. They're all union pipe fitters, and they did it all on their own time. So there's a big effort here to get water and to get it safe in the interim until we can get hooked up to the Carigani water line, get things back on track.
Thanks a lot for joining us.
Appreciate it.